Charter Review Workshop meeting is called to order at 6 p.m. Before we get started, I would like to thank the Charter Committee for all your hard work. After going through all this stuff, you have been working very hard, and thank you so much. Exactly. So let's just get started. Oh, no, before we get started, it's public comment.
Roll call.
Oh, roll call. I should pay attention to the agenda.
Commissioner Douther,
Present.
Commissioner Hodges,
Here.
Commissioner Oakley,
Here.
Vice Mayor Weinstein,
Here.
Mayor Black.
Here. The floor is now open for public comment. Okay. Yes. I've never done it, but I would think so.
Right now, we're actually a public comment on things that aren't on the agenda, so if there's, yeah.
Oh, okay. So, got it. Any more public comment? Floor is now closed for public comment. Now, as far as to procedurally, I think that's a good question. I assume it's a workshop, so we will just.
If you want to open the first item, then I can kick you off with a little introduction.
Okay.
Do you want to listen
Could
to
we,
Ralph's, comment on the procedure, whatever?
Well, I think that's what Ralph's going to do for us, give us the procedure.
Okay.
You know, can I just throw one thing out there real quick? You know, if we gave the people that was on the charter committee, get them to sit up front and give them the microphone, the handheld microphone, just so they could pass it from between them, I think it would make it a lot easier and quicker than getting up, sitting down, getting up, sitting down type of thing. So, I mean, can we do that? I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
Madam Mayor, it's the pleasure of the board, whatever you wish to do. What we can do also, if you'd like to have the chair and the vice chair, we can actually have them sit at the presenters table as well and to be part of the discussion with staff as they were intimately involved in this process. So we're not, in essence, shuffling mics. So certainly whatever the board wishes.
Yes.
You have to either stand up at the podium or sit at a chair or use a walk-around microphone.
Or come up here.
Yeah, if you want, three of you can come up here, or four, because we have a seat over there.
Yeah, we got presenters.
I have a question before we start.
On the side.
Yeah.
If-
On the side.
If it's not the vice chair or the chair of the charter committee speaking, but another member of the charter committee wants to say something, do they say that they're speaking as a citizen, or are they speaking for the committee?
Well, I'm going to give you today what the committee's work product is.
Okay.
And then you can open up to board discussion if you have questions you want to ask committee or committee members or committee chair, or committee might have a majority viewpoint or a minority viewpoint, you know, so let's see how it goes when we get into it.
I was just thinking about it.
So today what's in front of you is the work that has been done by the Charter Review Committee. They've made their recommendation as a committee to adopt these changes and bring them forward to you. There's two things that you have. One is the ballot ordinance. The ballot ordinance is how the charter amendments are put to the electorate, the voters. They have to vote on charter amendments at referendum. Each charter change has to be listed. The things that you consider when you're putting together a ballot ordinance is you can't have what they call log rolling. Each question, each subject matter should be a separate question. You can't hide the ball. The question has to reflect what the change is accurately. You cannot advocate for a change in the ballot question language. You can't say pro or con or slant the language to take a position. You're putting these questions to the voters, and then the voters will decide. Because they have done so much work on so many different areas, there's quite a number of questions here. The ballot questions are limited to 75 words. so they can't go on forever. They have to, some of them have to be summarized. Some of them that are less than 75 words, you can put the entire change in the question. There's 28 questions. The way I have the draft ordinance set up is each charter amendment question is on its own page number. So for example, if you're looking at charter amendment ballot question 8, and charter amendment 8 is reprinted, and it's all on page 8 of the proposed ordinance. So that'll help you keep track of the questions that would go on the ballot. Now it's up to you as a city commission whether you want to put all or some or none of these questions. You may think that 30 questions is too many for a voter to sit through at a ballot box while they're filling out their ballots. You may think it's not too many, so you may want all 28 to go. You may disagree with some of the proposed changes. If this commission disagrees and doesn't want to put them on the ballot, you don't have to. These are just advisory recommendations from the Charter Review Committee. If you want to make tweaks to the language, that's within your discretion also. If you see typos, that kind of thing, that's also something to bring up. Each ballot question in the ordinance is by subject matter, so it might be easier to go through the ballot question ordinance than to go through the actual charter, which is also provided. In the charter, we've moved some sections around, in particular a section about city manager where you'll see a lot of stuff crossed off. That doesn't mean it's removed, it means it's been moved to another section. You will see a cross out at city treasurer. The Charter Review Committee recommended doing away with the city treasurer as a charter officer. So that may be something you want to discuss, and I want to highlight with you the difference between the changes there with city manager and city treasurer. Staff is here to give comment too on some of these questions or answer any questions. I know the city manager has some thoughts. Keep in mind that the charter is like the Constitution for the city. It establishes a framework for the political governance of the city. Much of the detail can be put into the code, but the charter itself sets up like a constitution. The thing that's different about charters is to change a charter, you must go to the voters. To change the code of ordinances or to change the code, it simply takes 2 readings by this board. So once it goes into a charter, it's harder to change. As we go through some things to keep in mind are what is the state statute requirements. The city cannot do anything that's in conflict with state statutes or preempted by state statute. You can work in an area where the state has not preempted you as long as you're not in conflict with the state statute. So with that, I guess the first question was just stylistic stuff. We had some gender issues with some of the language that was in the charter where we said his position. Instead of changing to his and her, we've tried to use gender neutrality and change the grammar around a bit. And we picked up some typos, we picked up some antiquated language, we picked up sentences that could be shortened and turned into plain English, so we tried to do that as we went along. So with that, I guess you have the ballot questions with each individual charter amendment by subject matter in that ordinance, and that might be the place that you want to start to go through them. But it's at your pleasure.
Before we start
Go ahead.
If we do this in 2 separate ballots, 2 different elections, because obviously can't put 30 on one ballot, and I wouldn't put 30 on the November ballot anyway, based on the fact that the county and the state probably have a lot of stuff that's going on that one. Do you have to put that question in as the first one for each one?
So if you decide that you want to split these between November and the next general city election, which I think is in March, you could just keep a list. I would like, you could make a motion that, when we get to the actual ordinance readings, today's just a workshop. But you could put together a list of what you want to go in November and a list of the things that you want to put on in March. It doesn't have to be 1 through 15,
No, that
or
wasn't my
1 through
question.
12. It can be 1, 7, 9, 15.
That wasn't my question.
Okay,
My question
sorry.
was this very first ballot question, number 1, that talks about gender and all the changes that were made. Do you have to use that question in both elections, or can it just be in one? Because
Well,
you're gonna have those
yeah.
things happen in both of them. Do you see where I'm going?
What we would do in question 1, it would not involve any of the substantive changes that are here.
Right.
We would have to pull the substantive changes out. And question 1 would just be taking out references to his commissioner where it's a man, taking that out.
Right.
So, and then typos, so there would be no substantive changes, that could just go once. We can do
Okay,
that in
okay.
November and
That
just
was my
clean
question.
up. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Just do the cleanups, as long as we're not making any substantive changes at all. Now, some of the substantive changes have some of the typos and gender neutrality in it, but I'm going to do a pass through the charter that just has the gender neutrality and the grammar and doesn't make any substantive changes.
Okay.
Under the first one, Charter Amendment 1, it says, see attachment A. Is attachment A the charter itself?
Well, I have not prepared that yet.
Oh,
We have the charter amendment here attached behind the ballot ordinance, so that's A. But once you decide which subject matters that you're going to tackle and which ones you're not going to tackle, it'll be a little easier for me to figure out how to prepare Exhibit A.
Madam Mayor, if I may, consistent with how I've seen this done in other organizations, usually what boards will do is select 2 to 4 charter amendments that they'd like to present to the voters. And in some cases, it's usually the easier items first or the more pressing items. It depends on the nature of the issues, just to get your voters in the process to understand that it's going to be an incremental approach to amend the charter, and understanding that when you go to the ballot box, you're not just voting on, who your commissioner is or who your governor is. Get them in the habit of looking for those charter amendments. So the big concern that we have from the staff point of view is voter fatigue. If we go with too many questions, certainly we know that people are going to stop at certain points. So if the board wishes to look to prioritize charter amendments, whether it's ones that you just want to get out of the way quickly, and then we can work with marketing to put together a public information campaign as far as what the layperson's interpretation of the charter amendments are, and then what are subsequent charter amendments that will follow in the March and then again in November, we can certainly do that. So whichever way the board wishes to attack this, staff can make sure we complement it with information to the public, and then putting information on our website to effectively explain what happens if you vote for X, what's the impact that it will have on the city as well. So it really determines which direction you want to go. Some communities choose to get it all out of the way with one fell swoop. It just depends on what your priority is and how you'd like to attack this.
After reading this over and going through it numerous times, what I did personally was I came up with a list of ones that I think should be on November, and then maybe the other ones pushed to March, and then some of the ones that would be pushed to March also had some, and I thought needed to be reworded or thought out a little bit more. It's kind of the way I looked at it when I read this. Okay, these here, they're pretty self-explanatory, very easy, should be easy to, for the voters. And then these other ones, I thought needed to be reworded, or like I said, going in a different direction. And as I guess we go through that, that's what we'll kind of talk about, right?
Right, correct. And to that point, unfortunately, the statute provides that we have to be able to explain this complex item in 75 words. So what we will do is, if there's any charter provision that it's hard to really understand what the city's effectively trying to accomplish, what we will do is work with the city attorney and draft a layperson's interpretation of that, and we can publicize that to folks to say, if we do X, this is effectively what happens, because unfortunately we're kind of pigeonholed with respect to how much words we can use in the ballot language, and so it's really hard to explain some of these components of that. So if there is something that you say, well, it's an important issue, and there's just not enough here for someone to make an informed decision, what we will do is we will create probably a paragraph or two explaining why we're making or recommending the change and communicating the facts to the voters, because the statute allows for us to do that. We can't advocate, but we can educate.
Okay.
So I think you answered my question, that the ballot will actually have the question on it, and underneath it'll have some explanation, but something somewhat smaller and shorter than this.
No, the ballot will simply have that question, number 2, for example. It'll have this question.
Uh-huh.
This charter amendment would require a simple majority vote of a quorum or members present and eligible to vote instead of 3 affirmative votes for actions of the Board of Commissioners, including ordinances, resolutions, and other actions. For example, approval of contracts, minutes, etc. Should the charter be amended, yes or no? That's all that will appear on the ballot. The actual charter amendment language, the strike-through, does not appear on the ballot.
What we would do is we would create effectively a sample ballot that would have the questions and a definition of effectively what happens. So almost like a cheat sheet that folks can go into the ballot box, write their notes, and have an explanation as to what we are
Okay, good.
trying to accomplish.
Great.
There's some questions out there, Maggie.
Yes, June.
You could probably pull that one microphone down closer to you that's hanging up there.
Oh, okay, I'll try to talk into this. Just one thing, the other day when we wound up our meeting, we very quickly, actually Ralph worked up with us very quickly to suggest a ballot language. And after reading these today, I realized some of them are kind of awkward and hard to follow, and maybe we wanted to maybe make it a little more concise yet.
Yes.
Like that number 2, when I read it, I kind of thought maybe we should change it to say, the charter amendment would enable or require the Board of Commissioners to approve ordinances, resolutions, and other actions by a simple majority, so long as a quorum is in attendance. Try to make it more understandable. And so,
Right, because when you say simple majority, people really don't know what a simple majority is. And if you say, you can say a quorum of, a quorum's got to be 3 or more,
and,
or at least 3.
well, as long as there's a quorum of members attending, so if you have 3 members attending, a majority would be 2, so you could pass it with 2 votes on certain.
Quorum was 3. Is a quorum 3?
A quorum means you can have a meeting, so a simple majority means if you have 3 people at the meeting, a vote of 2 people is
Okay.
required to pass minutes,
Okay.
adopt
I'm with you.
contracts, do ordinances.
So that was actually the change we were proposing, that in,
Currently in the charter, it says you must have 3 votes, no matter what your quorum is that day.
3
Just
affirmative.
3 votes,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
3 affirmative votes,
Don't
right?
So just, yeah.
So I guess what I was just trying to explain quickly, that we, if you read these and they're a little harder to follow than you think they should be, maybe we could make them a little simpler to understand by just rewording them a bit.
That's what we're here to do tonight, I guess,
We're gonna do that tonight.
or at first reading.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
Do you want to give me that language for number 2? Do you have other language for other question numbers?
We can make some copies for them as well.
Yeah, we'll make copies of it.
Is
You
that
could come up
necessary to
tonight as we
change?
go
If
through
you
them.
don't
If they
have a
go through them
quorum,
all
you don't have a
tonight.
meeting, right?
I'm sorry, could you say again, John?
I say, if you don't have a quorum, you don't have a meeting anyhow.
You have to have 3 people to have a meeting.
Right.
Right.
Right, but I think the original language in the charter says that you need 3 affirmative votes. So if you even have quorum, you effectively still can't pass something unless it's unanimous. So that was the intent behind making that modification to say, basically having the majority to effectively pass something in the event that you only have
So
3
2 out of
elected.
3. And it
Most
should be
cities,
simple majority, not simply majority?
yeah, it should be simple, yeah.
Can I say one more thing here? Doreen, did you want to tell them about, we got through all of the charter on this except for one section?
I was wondering if you would want to address that, Ralph, that we did leave out the rather complicated section because we had a joint meeting with the Civil Service Commission, and that dovetailing with their duties and how that was going to be structured was far too in-depth. So we haven't even addressed that, thinking it was going to be something that would go to March anyway. But the charter review wanted to spend time on that specific item at a future meeting and then bring that to you. So that's not even included in here because that's a lot of more work.
Yeah. Chair, is there anything else that you wanted to present to the commission?
Well, going through, and I wasn't sure how you were going to do that. One of the things that I thought was awkward was the, you touched on it, Mr. Evans, about people may be confused that we're doing away with the city manager or how it's restructured. So I didn't follow that in the wording, so I think we need to work on that so that it's clear. But the other thing is that in number 18, where we're effectively removing the city treasurer, I think that as a committee and the commission, they need to know why we did that, because it was the feeling of the committee that the way it was worded, the ambiguity that was there that caused the problem of a definition of what do you do when you have the situation that we had previously with the city manager and we were trying to go through budget, and when you have finance director used in one place in the charter following city treasurer in another, we asked the city attorney if a city treasurer designation was required, and he verified that by statute it's not. So you have a finance director, but that position is not a standalone charter officer. And the way our charter read was that the city treasurer was a charter officer, but then the finance director really wasn't and didn't have that same capacity. So it was very confusing. So if I'm, jump in here, folks, if I am missing the point, but the city manager and the direction of the duties that encompass how that's handled and the reporting requirements as they flow through to the commission, are better defined, we think.
So why isn't the finance director a charter member or the city treasurer? I mean, why
So
is taking that out?
it's a political question. You can have a certain number of charter officers. Typically, charter officers would answer directly to the city commission. You would hire and fire charter officers. This city had kind of, I believe, some language that kind of got glommed on and grew over time. It appears you first started with the city treasurer, and then you said it shall also serve as the director of the finance department, and then in parentheses called him a finance director. So the position apparently really was one and the same. You had the ability to hire and fire the city treasurer / finance director. But when you were hiring, you were supposed to consider, or you are supposed to consider in your existing charter language, it's kind of convoluted, a recommendation from the city manager, and then you would hire. So that part was not a
was
good
very
way to
convoluted.
do it. Yeah, it would be should be more like, if you're going to have a finance director or a city treasurer, pick one name, call it a city treasurer or a finance director. And if you want to keep them on the same level as the city manager, you could keep them in the city charter. The city manager has concerns about having a department that is not under his control for hiring and firing of employees, his currently structured, he is in charge of hiring and firing employees within the finance department, not the city treasurer, not the finance director. So it leads to an employee who's in the finance department really having two masters. They take directions from a finance director, but they're hired and fired by a city manager. So that can be difficult for an employee to have to serve two masters. So if you are going to keep one, then you may want to consider sorting out how you're going to arrange that charter office, whether the city treasurer is in charge of his own employees, or her own employees, it becomes a little bit convoluted. So it seemed to streamline government. You would put all employees under the city manager, including the director of finance. What you're giving up, though, is a check and balance. A city treasurer sometimes is a check and balance on a city manager. Yeah, Jonathan had an example. We need to do this, but we don't have the money. Or this needs to be done even though we don't have the money. So if you're going to make those determinations, those are the considerations you would have as to whether or not to keep a finance director or treasurer as a charter officer.
So with taking the city treasurer out everywhere, has it been replaced as finance director at this point?
The Charter Review Committee, after considering this and after hearing from the city manager, you should hear from the city manager also, decided to take the city treasurer and finance director completely out of the charter. It would only appear in the code of ordinances. It would be a department of the city, just like any other department, like HR department or planning and zoning department. It would not rise to the level of a charter officer.
And if I may just kind of jump onto those comments, when we reviewed the charter, and in my past experience, in most cases, in all cases actually, the finance operation is one of the key components that is the responsibility of the administrator. In the event that you have a situation where you have a city treasurer, and in our charter, it says that the city manager basically recommends to the board for the purposes of appointment to serve in that capacity, but it doesn't go any further to say who effectively is the individual who's responsible for in the event you needed to remove or in the event you needed to provide evaluations, etc. So it was really nebulous in its duties and responsibilities. Also, there was contradicting responsibilities that the city manager is supposed to do this and the finance director is supposed to do that. So in the conversations that when I presented to the Charter Review Board, it wasn't something that I wanted to see a situation where you can create a de facto two-city system, because if you have a situation whereby the finance director manages the finance operation, when a department director says, Mr. City Manager, we need to do this because of X, Y, and Z reasons, and then they get the authorization from the city manager, but then it finds themselves in a situation where the finance director, for whatever reason, and it can be outside of the monetary scope, says, no, I don't think we need to do this. Effectively, we have a situation whereby the board then becomes the referee to that dispute. And I think for an effectively run municipal operation, you hold the manager accountable for the fiscal operations and the fiscal health of the organization, and you can still adhere to all the fiscal policies and the reporting structures, and you can do that effectively through the Code of Ordinances. But I don't think it is the most efficient operation to have a situation where you have one department director that is propped up a little bit higher than their peers because of that type of, I think it causes for some rift within the ranks. Also, to the attorney's point, you would effectively have a situation whereby all the employees underneath the finance director would report to the city manager, because in the charter it says that all the other employees serve at the pleasure of the administrator. So you have a questionable situation whereby the manager may ask an employee to do this, the finance director says no, not to do it, then it's just an awkward environment. So in conversations with my peers and then looking at how most government structures are, usually your charter officers are your city clerk, city manager, and your city attorney. You see the city treasurer usually in the early inceptions when a city first incorporates, they create that separation to mirror the separation of authority in Washington. So I think for a efficient and a seamless process, I think the better thing to do is to leave your charter officers as the city attorney, city manager, and city clerk, and have that finance director be at the same peer level with the other departments' directors.
Question, Jonathan, did you provide the commission the memo that you provided to the charter committee?
I don't know, they did not get it as part of this agenda packet, but I can certainly furnish that.
I would recommend that. I found it to be, and I think other members of the
It was
charter
emailed to us.
committee. Huh?
It was emailed to us.
It was, the three-page memo?
Yeah.
Okay.
I sent them so many
Okay.
emails out.
Yeah.
All right, so you do have that, because I felt that it showed the research, it showed the background, and, you know, brought in the information from the city attorney, and the city manager's reasoning. So I found that extremely helpful, and hopefully you all have read it too.
I did read it, and I don't care if we call it a city treasurer or a finance director. I don't think that's sort of immaterial what we call this person, but
I'm not gonna read
I think it would limit our, the board's contact with the finance person. And after reading Jonathan's email, it seems like he talks about it's confusing to people and, what else? But I don't think it's confusing at all. I think it's working just fine, so I'm not sure why we have to fix something that's already working. That's all.
Madam Mayor, to your point, the arrangement and the relationship with the finance director remains the same. Board members could effectively go to the finance director and ask any questions that they may have. It's just that as it relates to the roles and responsibilities in the charter, the manager should have the opportunity to select who or he or she feels is most suited within their respective leadership team. In addition to, in the event that we had to go through a hiring process for a finance director, if you have to seek confirmation from the board, that also slows up the process to be able to get the best and brightest talents, because invariably finance, planning, and building official, I've gone through selection processes for those positions, and effectively if you can't move within the next couple of days to bring somebody on board, then that provides an issue of you getting that particular person to be a part of your organization. And then the other point is that it then it opens up the door if the elected officials have direct oversight of the finance department. It also is counter, in my opinion, to the provision in there with the non-interference, because now you're effectively managing a component that's the day-to-day operations of the city. And so I think creating that delineation of duties and that separation just provides for easier and smoother management from the internal components. Each and every department director certainly is welcome to speak to any of the commissioners and ask any questions you may have, but they're not incorporated in the charter. And so it was staff's it was my recommendation to effectively remove that and have it as all the department directors serve at the pleasure of the manager, and they're not stipulated in the charter.
Jonathan, I kind of, you know, if I'm hearing correctly, I'm not sure if I am. You know, I think some of the people up here are concerned because I know, and I'm going to use Elaine Poe, she was, you know, gotten all kind of crap because she went and talked to an employee without going through the city manager, you know. And I guess they don't want to see that happen, that if any one of these commissioners want to walk in and talk to somebody, you know, I don't think, you know, and for purposes of transparency, I don't think you would ever say no, but, you know, I guess I don't want to come under that type of situation that a previous commissioner came under, that she got slammed because she went and talked to somebody without
Going through you.
going through the city manager. And, you know, and I think we need to work through something like that, you know, and if you have heartburn with me going and talking to the to human resource lady or to the parking meter people, you know, you need to be telling us that up front. Or do we have carte blanche to go do this, you know? And that's kind of, I think, a lot of this might be coming from. Am I correct with some of this?
I don't,
Absolutely.
well, I've never ever thought, I guess, that any commissioner, any elected official should speak with any department head or any employee on an official basis without going through the city manager first. It's more work. But I always just think, and I've always done that, or I've always tried to do that, I think it's important because Mr. Evans or any good city manager has his pulse on everything and we might not be aware of something with a department head, and maybe we're getting a little bit off the
Charter.
the subject here. Right, we're getting off the charter, but I feel real strongly about that. Let's just go on.
Can we,
I wanted to say, but back to the charter. Can we go back to the charter? Can we just go back to this? I sure do appreciate everybody's working so hard too, and I did read the information that we got this morning. I read it a couple of times, and the 29 proposed amendments, and I know we're going to go through all of them and everything, but personally, I guess I felt that 20 of them, if I was a voter, I'd say 20 of them were very good. And one of them I said no to, and 8 of them I had questions on. When I read them through the second time, when I read them through the first time, I just read through and I understood that the ballot question, at the top was how the ballot was going to be worded and everything. Then when I looked at it again, when I read it the second time, I changed my thinking from hopefully that we would do all of the questions on, my initial thinking was that we would split them up, okay, and do the ones that maybe would be less thought intensive, okay, to be the first ones. And then after I read them all over the second time, I changed my mind, and so we'll all work on that and have our own thoughts too. But I decided that I would surely like to see all of them on the March ballot, because the voter will have a lot of time to educate himself, and nobody will be confused. I thought to myself, gosh, what if I looked at it after November? What if I looked at it in February and thought, God, I'm confusing things. What should I vote for in November? Okay, so I know they're all different issues, but that's the way I kind of thought of it, was that to put them all on the March. That was just my thought.
and I disagree with that wholeheartedly, yeah.
Why?
I think, we should, take some of the ones that I think are very explicit and very easy and move them to November. Because otherwise we put 30 of them on in March, I think either March or November, either one, the voter's gonna have voter fatigue, because there's so many things, just getting my ballot in the mail, there's 16 names or 16 different positions I gotta go through, not counting, the homestead exemption and all these other things that will probably be on there. So I think if we put a few on there, it kind of gets the voters in the process of thinking and being ready for March. If we wait and put 30 of them on there in March, I think, once again, they're gonna go, oh crap, going through this stuff, and 30 of them. I think it's just way too many for the city to do at one time.
Well, I think it's too many to do at one time, but depending how we split it up between now and March, basically, it's too much to do at one time to get too many on this coming ballot, because we'll be rushing through it and making mistakes. And so I think we should maybe start looking at John's top 5, or if anyone else has some top ones.
I think let's start going through them, and as somebody says, oh, I would like to see that on November, we can mark that down. And at the end, we can see how many that we have that we want on November. It might only be 5, it might be 10. I'm not sure as we kind of go through it. But, I think we just need to kind of start and go through each one, and if somebody doesn't like the wording or whatever, we can ask the charter committee to explain better, or tell us why they decided what they did. But I think we really need to kind of get started on it. So how are we going to do
I
this?
think we should go through them one by one instead of skipping
Okay.
totally around.
Who's going to read it?
Number 3.
Well, I think number 1, should be on the ballot in November, for sure. So that gives us the, if everybody says no, then we got problems to start with, from March. So I think the first one should definitely be on there, and the wording to me was okay.
I agree.
Somebody want to read all these, or I'll read them?
No,
Do we have a
I think
consensus?
Just go through and make your comments, and like, you ballot number 2, you made that, and Ralph's gonna look at that and incorporate it.
Correct.
We caught the typo, and unless
Can you talk in the mic?
I think unless you wanted to spend more time on an item, then,
We just
chime
did,
in
yeah.
if you've got a comment, and if you don't, we move on to the next one.
All right,
Number
so
3.
what happened with number 2?
Yeah, what are we doing?
Number 2, they turned it over to Ralph to reword.
Yep, and so number 2, I guess, one thing to consider in the political process, you have 5 commissioners. If 2 commissioners have a conflict, then it would take a unanimous vote of the 3. If, say, you have 3 commissioners show up at a meeting, it would take a unanimous vote of the 3 to pass any item. So what the Charter Review Committee is recommending is that you go to what most cities have, is a simple majority of the quorum. So if 3 people are here, it would take 2 out of 3 to pass the typical item.
I think unanimous vote would be a better way to put it in there than simple majority, because that in itself is going to confuse people.
Well, it isn't
Well, we
a
would not be
unanimous vote.
requiring a unanimous vote, right? We would not be requiring a unanimous vote. Right now, the
Okay.
city charter says that you have to have 3 affirmative votes to pass any item.
And
This
I
would
don't
change
think
it, so
even-
if you have if you
Oh, you have
have
a quorum,
less than a
3.
full quorum, if there's 4, then it would take 3. If there's 3, then it would only take 2.
That's a unanimous
So
vote.
2 out of 3 is not unanimous. 2 out of 3 is 2/3.
It's the majority,
Majority
vote.
the
Majority.
simple majority.
Because you have to have
Of the
3
members
people
present.
here. The
It would-
minimum you could have of a quorum of the 5 in order to hold an effective meeting would be 3.
Right.
And you don't, and apparently our charter's read that way, and I question whether all these years we've even been looking at it correctly, but, so you have an item and you vote on it, it's the way it's always been considered, a quorum vote at that point would be 2 out of 3. You wouldn't want to require,
Typically, cities and counties work on a majority vote basis.
Right.
I think
And
that's
you
how
are
it should be
including,
worded.
whoops,
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, and you are, you're not taking out the word, the roll call. I mean, the roll call is important to that. You're still saying, even if it's 3 people, you're going to name how the 3 people voted.
Roll call is required by state law,
Yeah.
by sunshine law, but we're putting it in here, so if someone just reads the charter, they know they need to do a roll call.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So number 3, we're on number 3 now.
Number 3, I can explain a little bit. There was a proposal at the Charter Review Committee to do a referendum for planned development rezonings and special area plans, but that's preempted by state statute. You're no longer allowed to do referendum on a development order or a plan amendment. So that was preempted by state law. You can't do that anymore since 2011. So instead, what some cities and counties have done and is allowed is to have a supermajority vote on these more controversial rezonings and special area plans. This would be those planned development rezonings. And special area plans, you would require a vote of 4 members. It's called a supermajority vote. So instead of the current charter requires 3 affirmative votes for all items, this would be at a single out planned development rezonings and special area plans and require at least 4 votes. So a 4-to-1 vote on a rezoning would pass, but a 3-to-2 vote would not be enough to pass the rezoning or special area plan. This adds a heightened level of scrutiny and political hurdle for rezonings to achieve to get approved. Projects that don't have the support of at least 4 of you would not get approved.
I think the wording's fine, but I think I would like to leave this one till March.
and I just wanted to make a comment that I wanted to share that from the Charter Committee. This was in memory of Sam Baker. This was special to him, and he had done a lot of work prior to his passing about charter review. And this was something that, he wanted to see. He wanted to put some teeth into it for the commission that the residents would be able to speak up. Well, if we're not allowed to do that by, statute, then by having a greater supermajority was the recommendation of the committee. And I just wanted to ask on that ballot question, why couldn't we capitalize planned development rezoning and capitalize special area plan. I mean, it makes it look
You
like
can.
it's official,
Yeah.
so just a recommendation.
Well, that
We
is
had-
the SAP from 2009, basically.
I like that. I like that question number 3 too. But I guess I would think it's important enough to place that on the November.
And especially if it's in recognition of Sam Baker's work, I would rather do it sooner than later.
But I think
it's
there's
important.
some easier ones in there that we could get on that, because we're going to be real limited
Yeah.
as to how many we actually choose to put on.
Well, I think you just
Well,
prioritize
it's
them
written
and then
very,
we.
it's
Well, we
written
can
very
put it on-
succinctly.
Yeah, we can put it on now, then if we have too many, we can take some off at the end.
Right, but I'd mark it down for
Right.
November.
Okay.
Okay?
Number 4, I have questions about.
I'll explain it real quick. This is a consecutive term limit. This would say that the mayor and commissioners shall serve no more than 3 consecutive regular terms and shall not seek re-election for a period of 2 years for either mayor or district. So you can't jump from mayor to district
Understand,
commissioner.
my question is the word regular in there. And it being, let's say Nancy Hodges was just elected. If something happened to her, and she had to drop off, she doesn't even have a year finished, and the board would have to appoint somebody, okay? Is that a regular meeting? Is that a regular term, even though it's not a full term?
That's
where-
not a regular term, but if you
So
want
they'd
that
be
to
able
be
to do
included,
3
you
on
want
top
to
of that.
you want to be clear about whether you want that included or not.
Yeah, so that's my question. Is that, do we want to do 3 plus? I guess is my, where I kind of got confused.
Right now, it's 3 plus,
Well, no,
with
it'd be
using the
3
word
because it's
regular.
not a regular term.
Right now, regular term is in there, so you would be eligible for 3 plus any irregular term that you had.
Plus any irregular.
Yeah.
So the commissioners are limited to 6 years and the mayor is limited to 9. Correct?
Yes,
How long
No,
is the
it was.
mayor's term?
3.
3 years.
3, yep.
I recommend we make that 1.
A half, Maggie?
All right, never mind.
And then obviously they could sit out for 2 years and seek some other,
Right.
if they moved districts or wanted to be mayor and weren't mayor, or wanted to be a commissioner if they were mayor, so. And that was recommendation by residents. I had
Okay.
had that brought to.
So we just leave it like it is, regular terms? Okay. And do we want to wait till March for that one? Okay.
I'd wait for March.
What did you decide to do back with number 2? Was that a November or a March? I missed that. On number 2, did you want number 2 on
March.
November or March?
March.
March?
Yeah, because that's got to be redone, yeah.
Okay, just keep in track as we go along. Number 5 is an existing provision primarily within the existing charter about going to referendum before approving sales, conveyances, or leases of property that exceed 10 years. But there was a recommendation from the committee. I believe they heard from the city manager. We added number 3 on the bottom, which is any landowner possessed by the city providing access to water, canals, bay, or Gulf beach. Thinking that it's important to preserve the public beach access rights. What this would require is that the city commission itself could not give away beach access. It would have to go to the referendum for the voters to give it away.
And my question on this one is, we already voted on that in the city.
Right.
June?
Yeah, this is adding in the beach access. So, like, for example, recently in Sarasota County vacated a roadway on Siesta Key. It was a controversial decision. That was made by the commission alone, and some people have challenged it. There are other cities like Bradenton Beach within Sarasota County that says, in the charter, you shall not vacate beach access or Gulf access or water access without going to the
What I'm
voters.
saying, Ralph, is last November, it went to the voters, and the voters said, you can't give away anything that the city owns. without-
That's still in here.
Without going to
That's still in there. We just made it abundantly clear that when it comes to beach access and access to our waterways, that we wanted to call that out and specifically say that that's a non-starter for us as a community, that we will always protect and preserve that. And so in the conversations with the Charter Review Board, we thought putting, you know, more language specific to that would help clear that as a city, we place a premium on the preservation of those areas.
Okay.
There's an exemption for utility easements that's in the existing charter. It's preserved in this new proposal too.
I just have a question. The way this reads to me.
June, can't hear you.
I'm sorry. The way this reads.
It's not on, apparently.
Try it, yeah, try it.
I think you would just have to stand closer.
Yeah.
No. Is this on?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not an attorney, but the way this reads to me in English, when we have tacked on providing to water canals, bay, or Gulf Beach, we're qualifying and limiting this referendum to city property. I'm concerned about the way it's written, that it might
Right, it can be
be interpreted to
construed as-
qualify only that land
Right.
that it has some water-related value.
So
It's
maybe
like
to
1 and
include
3
but
are
not limited
redundant.
to,
Any land.
I
you
think-
know, something
yeah,
like
I
that.
think we should change.
Because you weren't changing, if you look at the charter language below, there's 1, 2, and 3. You weren't changing 1 and 2, you were just adding 3. So maybe your point is that to add a requirement, add an additional prohibition.
Because the sale.
I hear what you're
says any
saying.
Sale of any.
You
real
want to
property.
make sure the voters know that number 1 and number 2 are being retained?
Yeah, and actually, having thought about this and not really said it in the charter committee meeting, but thinking right out loud right now, I wouldn't put this on the ballot at all, because John's right. We had a referendum on this, and this may just
Totally.
open up a new issue that we don't need to get into.
It
You know what I mean? We have
probably
a
already
limited number.
included within number 1 and 2, number 3, as Jonathan said, it was just clarifying, providing express reference to water canals, bay, or Gulf Beach, but it does cover all land and owned or possessed by the city anyway, regardless of whether it's a bay or beach
Yeah,
or
why
not.
open that can of worms, I guess?
Okay, so we could, if it's your pleasure, we could take that out, and you really wouldn't have much difference.
So,
The
you guys-
only other thing would be rewording it here.
I think one of the reasons why we took the paragraph and broke it into numbers is that the way the charter was written, everything was like this run-on sentence. It was all in a paragraph, and you know, you'd have to stop and reread, and you got semicolons and things like that. So we thought, well, this is important, and we need to delineate it and break it out into, you know, sub-paragraphs. But I agree with June. I put on there a question mark, because it's like, well, we've covered it in number 1. And I know we're trying to reinforce the water canals, bay, or Gulf Beach, but
I think that we could accomplish the changes in the language with the grammar that's in number 1.
and do we need it at all if we, You know.
We could just make that part of ballot question number 1 if we don't include number 3. And we can still have the breakouts and the bullet points, number 1, number 2, and we'll put it in with number 1, because it's really just a
Right, because you're
changing the
just
grammar,
rewriting and.
streamlining
so if they
grammar.
vote no because they have some sort of heartburn over it, it's just gonna stay the way it is, and we've already voted that it can't be sold.
Okay.
So we, meaning the vote that we had last year. Okay, so if they vote no, then it's just, and I would think this would be something that could be on the March.
March, let's go with March on that one.
Do we really need to do it, though? If we just leave the third part out and just do a rewrite of what's already in there?
But
it
if you
just-
rewrite it, you have to
have
make
to-
it a ballot
I mean,
question.
you can't rewrite it, I mean, just from the run-on sentence and bulletize something?
I think
You
we
can't do it that
can.
way?
We can make it as part of number 1, where we're streamlining the grammar. Remember ballot question number 1?
Oh,
It
could
says
you?
reorganize and renumber sections and articles, streamlining grammar.
Can you put in paren the specific, you know, like we said, access to waterway canals and Gulf beaches, because obviously effectively that is still real property.
We'd have to add that
That would have to be a ballot.
on a ballot question.
But you can reword what's already there and change the run-on sentence where the semicolons are and bulletize them.
That's under question number 1. We're asking the voter,
Right,
can we make
okay.
all these changes?
So if you leave number 3 out, they can do it that way, and we can just take the whole question off. Unless you really want the beaches and, what was it, canals and water access and all that in there, so.
Currently, does it state utility easements, or are we just assuming that? I mean, I know you mentioned that before, but
It says
that's...
on the bottom of the existing language that's stricken through, the city shall have the power to convey public utility easements without submitting the same to a referendum vote of the
Oh, I
electors of
see
the
it.
city.
Okay.
And to the city attorney's point, when I was in Sarasota County, I had to work on that Beach Road project, and it's actually going before the voters, and it's going before the voters effectively to provide additional language consistent with what we're recommending as part of ballot question 5.
Yep.
So they have, in Sarasota County, they have language effectively that does the same thing that our language does, but because of this one controversial piece of roadway, effectively they're doing the same thing that we're doing and calling out specifically access to waterways, canals, beaches, those types of things. So that's the other argument to effectively what we're saying is that this other community has already experienced it on Siesta Key when they vacated Beach Road. There's a lot of push on the community to effectively change that language. So that's kind of the thought process as to what got us from point A to
But I
to
thought we
point
did
B.
that in the referendum question that we passed.
And that's exactly what they said in Sarasota too, until the county effectively vacated that. But the extra process with this here is that you would have to go to your voters. In Sarasota County, you can go before the Board of County Commissioners. So there's a lot more work that would have to do to effectively have that happen here, but nonetheless, that's why.
And I think
We
it has to
call
go to
that that.
referendum to vacate any property here. That's what we voted
Yeah.
on, didn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And that just kind of got by us.
So you're just, I mean, you're listing that here, but it doesn't really need to be because that was the referendum question.
Well, if it's going
So
to
you
go in
want it in
March,
there
we
or
have
not?
time to
I mean,
think about it until March. You know,
Okay.
if it's
Well-
put for March, it's something the Charter Review
Just
Board can
to be
consider
reviewed.
as we go
Well, but
forward.
I guess I'm confused then, because yes, we kind of forgot about, we had that vote and it was very important. We all fought for it.
Can you get closer to the
But-
mic? Thank you.
But if we had the vote, we did have the vote, and we put it in there that it has to go to referendum, but why isn't that in the charter? That
Because
we've
we
all
haven't
been
updated the
looking at.
charter.
It's in 1.7. It's there. If you look at the below, you were just striking it out to reorder it, but the language is there. It just doesn't call out Gulf Bay or Gulf beaches, canals, water.
Okay, so it says submitted to a referendum vote of the electors of this, okay, so it's in there, all right, so I don't think we need it in there.
I don't either. I mean, it's just gonna be another confusing question to add when it's basically taking care of itself.
Committee?
X. So we Xing it out?
X out.
X out.
Okay, how many more?
Number 6 is a charter amendment about the living within the district while you're a commissioner.
I don't like the beginning of it, where it says, at the time of election, you have to reside in that district. So if I wanted to run for District 1, all I have to do is 2 days before the election, move down there, and 2 days after the election, I move out.
No, you have to be in your.
That's
you
not
have
what
to-
it says.
You have to be in your district for, yeah,
There-
it's been
there-
there
No.
6 months.
Read that, that's not what it says.
That's
what I'm
true.
saying.
You're right.
But
It's saying
the-
the time of election, you have to be in that district. So I would like it to say 6 months.
So there's a distinction.
There's-
One is a candidate. A candidate has to live within the district, I think, for 6 months before they run. This is after you're elected. Say you're elected in District 1, and during your term, while you're sitting at the dais, you decide to move into a condo over in District 3. This would address that situation, whether or not you forfeit your office by moving from 1 to 3 while you're in office. Because technically now you're going to have a District 3 commissioner and you're going to have another person living in District 3 that's really the District 1 commissioner, are they allowed to serve out the rest of their term even though they don't live in that district
I
anymore?
understand that, but in the second sentence, for failure to reside in the district at the time of election, that's what's confusing to me. You know, so if I can move into District 1, 2, or 3 for a little bit of time right before the election, and as soon as it's over, I can move back to whatever I want to live. That's why I'm saying, I think it needs to say that you live in your district for at least 6 months prior to the election.
Because that's
And
over, that's over in the section that relates to
Candidates.
candidates and election
Okay.
and rules and.
But the question I have on it is, it says, and
Maybe we
if the
should-
commissioner moves to another district during their term in office, well, that district could be in Seminole. Can they move out of the city?
No, it says within the city in the actual language. We could put it in the ballot question too. I think we could just simplify it by saying, this charter amendment would provide that a commissioner may serve out their term if the commissioner moves to another district within the city during the term of office.
May serve the balance rather than serve out? Or does that-
Serve the balance. Yep.
But what happens, you know, and I also kind of ran into in my head, so if all the commissioners moved to a particular district, District 1, let's say, everybody moved down there, then you're going to have all the commissioners fighting for that one district and not for the city as a whole. You know, I know they were supposed to fight for the city as a whole, don't get me wrong, I understand that. But I think they would be leaning more towards the district they live in, you know, so.
So there is a
I don't
political
agree with
choice.
that.
A political choice could be that you require the district to live in that, the commissioner to live in that district their entire term.
That's why I think it should be.
Otherwise, they forfeit office.
Oh, I don't like that at all. I mean,
I
think
think restricting
that-
someone from, yeah.
Well, I think that if a commissioner is elected and then they, in a year or two, a year, 6 months after being there, they move to District 4, they live in District 1 and they move to District 4, certainly they should be given the opportunity to serve out their term, because while I think that we do have 4 districts in the city, I think in this day and time, it's not like it was when the city was started off in 1947, okay? Where you truly did look to see that your district was taken care of and that the infrastructure, because you're talking a whole different, period of time here. And I think nowadays all of us, look at the city as a whole. Certainly we are living in our districts and our constituents call us maybe before they call the mayor or, city hall, hopefully, and that's to diffuse certain issues. But I think that we should consider ourselves all strictly as representatives of the city.
If you're not going to change it, it might fall within the grammar, now that I look at it too, because it seems like we're only correcting grammar in the actual charter amendment. We're adding the words within the city, but I think that was understood.
We've even had occasions when we've had, nothing's happened about it, but in years past, we've had commissioners who've left the city entirely and they've served out their term. Now, that might have been against the charter, certainly,
This
but
would correct that.
I'm just saying, I'm
This
just
would
saying we
correct
did
that
have
and
that
make it clear.
situation.
Yeah, he had a house in Seminole, but he also had a house in Madeira Beach, which he said he lived in, but he didn't. He lived in Seminole, but he homesteaded the house that he didn't live in.
Nice.
And it was under,
It was different circumstances,
Right.
So this might have been an effort to correct that type of situation.
Right.
Well, what they're doing is to correct the situation because it happened.
Okay.
Well, I think like.
Then we should maybe leave it in.
If you moved out of the city, not out of the city, if you moved out of your district, you would still take care of your district, right?
Certainly, but I'm looking after the entire city as a whole, so would it matter, really? I think it's important for your constituents to for your district, but I think that language, I think all of that is a little bit antiquated sometime. I think it's important for your constituents to, I think it's important moving ahead, but I'll tell you that later, but I think it's important, for you to get your signatures within your own district, but still know that you're citywide.
Yeah, I
you know.
Well, that's
another-
number
That's
47
another
over
question.
here on the.
Okay. March?
So
March for number 7?
So before we go any further, the
Number
ballot,
6.
the ballot question then for number 6, you're gonna go ahead and change it to, they may serve the balance of the term of the commissioner?
The reading would say, this charter amendment would provide that a commissioner may serve out the balance of time remaining in the term if the commissioner moves to another district within the city
Okay.
during their term of office.
Okay,
And we'll put it on March.
okay, thank you.
Well, they have the within the city. There was someone that moved to Seminole. They're trying to address that situation.
Number 7.
Number 7, this is a change to the forfeiture of office provision. And I'm not sure that the charter amendment language on the bottom there is exactly correct. But what we tried to do here is say, if you're convicted of any felony, you're out, or a misdemeanor, but the misdemeanor would have to involve moral turpitude. So the involving moral turpitude is descriptor of misdemeanor, but any felony, you would forfeit office.
Well, that's going to be the thing that you have to put that on that informational piece because we hashed and rehashed what moral turpitude is.
So, you
It's
know,
like whose
Don't ask me
interpretation?
now. Well, no, there's a
Florida
legal interpretation.
a violation of a city ordinance can be a misdemeanor, and so, you know, they're so frequent. I mean, I think maybe a violation of your grass being too tall is probably not moral turpitude, but something like a DUI or a sexual offense, something like that.
there is a
Thievery,
legal
bribery, stealing.
What Florida statute is that? Is that the 475.25? For that moral turpitude?
I don't know if it's defined in statutes. I'll take a look.
Okay, so where are we going with that? March?
March,
Okay.
7 to March.
What was the statute section you had there, John? 475?
47525.
I thought 475 was a real estate
Okay.
tax.
That's something we'll have some time to work on if it's going to go on in March.
Okay.
Number 8, here we're adding really the word knowing. You would forfeit office if there was a knowing violation of sunshine law, ethics law, or public records law. Right now, we don't have knowing in there. If there's a violation, even if it was unknowing, that's grounds for forfeiture. This would change that to make it a knowing violation.
So
This is if you inadvertently violated the sunshine law or inadvertently violated public records law or unknowingly violated an ethics law, you wouldn't automatically forfeit your office.
who makes that determination?
That's in the next question, somewhere here.
And how do you prove it?
Yeah, I mean,
Hold on, let me try to find where we have that. Hopefully we have that in here. I might have missed it.
I did
We
not
spent a
see it.
lot of time on it.
I did not see that anywhere.
Yep, okay, that needs to be added
I
in.
think
We
the
spent a lot of
magistrate,
time on
question
there.
10.
Which one?
Question 10, I believe.
Question 10, let me make sure it's, yep,
Yeah.
number 10, that's where it's addressed. So this would clarify that if there was a motion that a commission member had done a felony or a misdemeanor involving moral turpitude or knowingly violated sunshine ethics or public records, it would go to a special magistrate. It wouldn't be decided by you all. That would remove the politics from the situation. Because what we don't want is people trying to use forfeiture for political reasons. This would go to a special magistrate who could subpoena witnesses, administer oaths, we'll hear all the witnesses, and we'll make the final decision. And the special magistrate's decision is then appealable to circuit court for judicial review, but not to you.
But the commissioners have to levy a charge or make
Yeah.
a charge, and it has to have a motion, a second, and a vote to refer this alleged infraction, right? Am I saying
Yes,
that
for a hearing.
correctly? To the special magistrate.
I guess my question was more like the knowingly part. So,
The special magistrate would have to determine whether there was any evidence of knowing violation. Some evidence that could be used in that type of cases. Did the commissioner attend ethics workshops? Did they attend sunshine law classes? Did they know what the public records law was? Did they instead follow, maybe the attorney gave bad advice and they followed the advice of the city attorney? That maybe that would be not a knowing violation. They assumed it was okay. All those type of facts, circumstances would all be considered in the evidentiary hearing to determine whether there was a knowing violation.
and then the other part on that I kind of get confused on is the public records law, because we're really not involved in the public records law. If somebody comes to me and says.
Well, no, you are, because say,
If you come to me and say, I want something, I just say, go see the city clerk.
and that won't be enough. Because if you have or maintain a public or private email, like a Gmail or a Comcast or rr.tampabay.com, and you have an email that came in there and it was about city business, and you failed to forward that to Clara, then you're the custodian of your own public records. If
Okay,
you
so
are
that's what you're
text
saying.
messaging people from your phones, text messages are public records if they involve official city business, and those are typically not maintained by Clara, they're maintained in your phone.
Okay.
So you may have public records,
I took it
as
more
well
if
as Clara.
somebody came in and said, hey, I need more copies of ABC, and I would say, go see Clara for it, go see the city clerk for it.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's what I was kind of thinking.
This would be a knowing violation of public records law, where someone asked you for something that only you possessed and didn't provide it.
So, 8 in March,
Yes.
And I think that specifying that in our charter, it says the Board of Commissioners shall be the judge and the grounds of forfeiture, and that, that the BOC is doing all that, and it just seemed to be
wrong.
such a political football, and,
I agree.
yeah.
I agree.
Number 9, we're trying to clarify the number of meetings that would be missed before you forfeit office. And it would be a failure to attend 3 consecutive regular scheduled meetings
So that would be
or regular
workshops,
scheduled workshops without being excused.
Is that any one meeting or a combination of therein?
Consecutive.
It says consecutive, it's got to be 3 in a row.
So
3
is
in
there a cycle? Is
But
it-
it could be,
is
it could be
your
a
total
regular,
cycle?
a workshop, and a regular. So it could be, all within 1 month. It used to be a regular meeting, so it would have to be 4 regular meetings. It would be 4 months that you would miss. Now you might be out if you were missed a whole month without excuse. And I think we can take out fails to maintain residency and voter registration, because that's in a different section that we've already addressed. So do you want to do that? I guess one of the things there is that you can get an excused absence as long as you write in and request it or send an email or.
Does the ballot question need to say by the Board of Commissioners? Because, somebody may read it and say, well, how, would they be that detailed? I don't know. To be excused. Well, who gives you
Okay.
a hall pass?
Without being excused by the Board of County Commissioners is in the existing language. But we could put that without being excused by the Board of Commissioners.
The other thing I had heartburn with this is, when are we gonna come into the 21st century and allow people to teleconference in? Every other business does it. This isn't
There's something in the
business.
Sunshine Law Manual that allows you to do it, but first you have to declare that there is an emergency situation. And then they leave the emergency situation determination up to you. Like if someone has a child that's in a hospital in Boston and has to call in from Boston because of that medical emergency, you can approve it, but you cannot do it as a routine matter.
How
Yeah,
do
that
we-
would have to be changed at the state Florida statute in the legislature.
Okay. I was gonna say, if we did that here, how would we set it up? Because we're not set up to accommodate someone calling in if they do have an emergency up in Boston or wherever. You know, we don't have the accommodations for that at this point.
I've seen it happen in Manatee County. Commissioner Whitmore, she calls in on the phone a couple times, or has called in on the phone a couple of times, and they just put her on a voice, and then they say, do you have any questions, Commissioner Whitmore? And then one time she didn't hear, or she wasn't there, and so they were talking and there was no answer. So it was difficult to know whether that commissioner was actually there and paying attention, especially if you're in a quasi-judicial hearing. You know, it's harder to be sure the person's actually there the whole time and the connection is there.
But statute does.
Clara, go ahead.
I believe in the Sunshine Manual, now you can be like on vacation or something and call in, but you cannot call in to make a quorum. The quorum actually has to be present.
Okay, so where do you want to put that?
March
Do you want to
9th,
do 3 or keep it at 4? I mean, go keep it at 4 or go down to 3 regular scheduled consecutive workshops, include the workshops as well as the meetings?
What was the thinking in changing it from 4 to 3?
You'll have to
then?
ask the charter review that.
Well, it was because, as it was, I think Ralph mentioned that it was just regular meetings. So if you had someone who, say they missed the regular meeting and a workshop, that didn't matter. The regular meeting and a workshop, that counted as 2. And you know what I mean? So by including the workshops, those are important. And to make that 3, we just felt that there was 4 without even including the workshop. I mean, that turns
Why aren't
into a
special
half a
meetings
year.
listed? Special meetings, because that would, special meeting called by the city manager or the mayor. I mean,
Well, it
it's still.
says regular scheduled or regular scheduled
Well, that's not a
workshop, so
regular
it
scheduled
takes-
meeting, that's a special meeting.
Well,
Right,
you
but
could
the
put,
special meeting is not
Yeah, because
appropriate
they're
here.
normally within 24 hours, the special meetings.
well, sometimes somebody may not be able to make a special meeting
Right, so you
I
because
change
of
understand,
Yeah.
but it shouldn't be all the time. I mean,
Did the committee consider, instead of doing it that way, maybe going, missing 4 meetings in a year versus consecutive? Did in a 12-month period, you miss 4 meetings, something like that?
No, consecutive is the key. Consecutive establishes whether you got continuity with what's going on the board and stuff. So I like the consecutive part being in
Yeah.
there. I just don't know if it should be 3 or 4.
And Madam Mayor, if I may, to that point, if you made it 4 meetings a year, invariably, if you're involved in a lot of other organizations, maybe with the Florida League of Cities, or you're traveling to Tallahassee, most likely you're going to miss a couple of board meetings while you're officially conducting city business. So having that 4 meetings a year would probably be problematic. Most cities recommend end up doing the consecutive approach, because then you see where it becomes habitual or those types of things. So whether it's 4 or 6 or whatever the board feels comfortable with, it's not uncommon to have those languages. And most cases, it's when it's unexcused absences.
Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise you could be missing a quarter of the
Talking to
year.
your microphone, please, I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Say otherwise you're missing a quarter of the year with no recourse. And we just can't have a commission that's missing numerous meetings and not participating in the city government.
So we're gonna leave it at 3 and
I think the 3 is fine, because
In
you've
March?
got the caveat in there
Yes.
without being excused. I mean, if somebody's in the hospital or something, so.
I just want to clarify, I think Doreen, I think you clarified this, that if I miss a regular meeting and then without excuse, and then I miss a workshop, and then I miss
another regular meeting.
another regular meeting, that's 3.
that's 3
It's not 3 of
consecutive.
the same kind.
Right.
It's
Yes.
3 any consecutive meetings, okay.
But then if you have an excuse, and a written excuse or whatever, it'd be up to the board to excuse you and allow that, would you say?
That's a good question. Who excuses you?
The
It would
board,
be the board,
yeah.
your peers.
You might have someone that has a stroke and they have to go to the hospital for a month at least, and they have rehabilitation or something, and they might be out for 2 months or 3 months. but they want to come back. Sometimes they may not want to come back, sometimes they want to come back, and you can decide what to do.
But during that time, if something like that did happen, hypothetically, wouldn't there be a person that would sit in as a temporary person? Could you
Nope.
bring someone in? No?
Not for the commissioners. We don't have a pro tem or a substitute commission. We just have your 5 seats.
So it sits empty until the person is either removed, unfortunately, by the BOC for violating the attendance, or they resign, and then you could fill, right? Do we not have provision to fill a vacancy?
Yeah, we do have
Yeah, we do.
provisions for
Yes,
that.
we did that. Yeah.
So number 9 is going to be yes in March.
Yes.
We don't have very many for November. Maybe we should just put that one on the November one.
Oh, we haven't gotten to to some of the meaty ones.
Well, that's true. We're only on 9. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So number 10 is the change that we would have a special magistrate determine the forfeiture of office for commissioners.
I have a recommendation to reword that, and I know June's not here, and she's really good at wordsmithing. The charter amendment would establish a procedure for forfeiture of office, comma, referring forfeiture allegations against the commission. To me, that just read.
Okay?
Establish procedure, that's right. They wouldn't establish a forfeiture.
Of office procedure. It didn't, it kind of was backwards.
So number 10 is yes with change.
Okay, March or November?
No, March.
Number 11, this would require that every district be approximately equal in number of residents, and that you would evaluate that every 5 years. Currently, it looks like you do it every 4 years, but I don't know that it's really been done.
Last time it was done was
I
like
think we're coming up. Clara can give some
It was done every 5 years.
clarification on it.
It was
we do
done
that
in
like in
2014.
Oh, I
and-
don't
it
know
was?
that it was
Okay.
done. It was supposed
And I've
to be
already
done.
prepared it, and it's on the August the 14th agenda.
Okay.
And I think that because essentially our districts never change, that it seemed, why not just extend it out to 5 years? And I think we also had, didn't we have a notation that that was closer to statute, or it was?
I think you were thinking with a lot of redevelopment in town and big condo buildings, you might have some changes in the future.
We
as
could
you
have
start
changes
building
in
it.
the future with that. I mean, you want to do it, but I think that we were moving it from every 4 years to every 5 years because I think it was mirroring something.
I think census or something.
We wanted to take that census part out because that was kind of outdated.
We were going to use the supervisor of elections is how Clara does it.
Right.
So this would just change it from every 4 to every 5 years.
I'd say definitely yes with this, but it piggybacks on the part of being able to get signatures citywide, because, and the reason I say that, especially like for my district, District 4, the majority of my district is condominiums, and a lot of times you can't get in there to get the signatures. You just, they're locked and you can't get it, and as they have more condominiums down at this end, so I think that piggybacking on the other, if it changes, the volume's going to come this way because this is where most of the condominiums are being built down in this end. So,
That's in ballot, the next one, ballot question number 12, would allow you to collect
yeah.
signatures to run citywide instead of just your district.
And I don't like that
So
one.
is 11 going to be March or November?
That would be March. 11 will be March.
And I just have a typo in there to point out or suggestion where in paragraph B, about 2/3 of the way down, where it says an imbalance of electors exceeding 15%, go ahead and put the percentage sign in the parentheses with the 15.
Okay.
Good catch.
Okay, and then 12, again, is to collect signatures citywide. Are you all in favor of that? You want March or November?
Yeah, I'm not in favor of it, but, I mean, I differ, my thoughts differ on that one as far as, I think that the candidates should be required to get the signatures from their district because I think it shows support from their district, even though they are, I understand John's point and I respect that point, you know, that sometimes it's hard to get into, you know, condominiums, et cetera, but I think that our city is small enough for 1,000 people to be able to get the qualifying signatures within your district, so.
And that was,
However-
the charter committee just really felt that looking at that, you know, to John's point, that if this district grows with more condominiums, which it is, that would be residential in nature in some cases, that it's just virtually impossible. You know, it's apples and oranges to District 1, where you can knock on doors, and, you know,
Yeah.
District 4, you just can't. So,
I found that when I
Well, you can
tried
have
to
some
collect
kind of
signatures,
meetings.
and then I talked to someone else who, you know, put their thing in during the recall thing, and a couple of the condominiums said, no, you can't come here and collect signatures, period. You know, so we're not gonna allow you to come into our building to knock on the doors to collect signatures. So that's the reason I kind of.
Right, and I understand that, and I respect that. I just feel differently only because, and it's not really got to do, I mean, I understand that point about the condominiums. I just think that the idea and the effort to get the signatures from your own district is important. It shows that you're, I guess I just think it shows your own district is,
I agree.
I don't know why, maybe it's old-fashioned of me, I don't know.
I agree, but there's those certain people that don't even know that they can vote outside their district. A lot of people
Well, you
don't-
educate
don't
them when you
under-
go around.
You educate them, you
People ask
you do that.
questions, you know.
Right, but that's where I heard it. They did not know they could vote outside their district when we were campaigning
Oh,
through it.
I remember that
So,
too,
You know, if you go get a card signed by that person, then they know that they can vote opened up.
Well, I just feel that way.
What's everybody think on this?
No, I think
I agree with it.
we should do it in March, and that we should do it, you know, citywide, because District 4 is really, really difficult to get signatures.
As a
I mean,
yes
it's,
for 12.
but you need to have a level playing field, that's all.
Then if you do make it citywide, why do we even need to have 4 districts in equal proportions? The only reason we're keeping that in equal proportions was because of the,
because when we have a
Reason-
residency requirement, that requires someone to live within a district, so you don't have somebody, 4 people from Snug Harbor sitting on, you know, the commission.
no, I mean the ballot question 11. Why do we even
Right,
have?
but the reasoning behind it was, okay, you get the card citywide for the reasons we've talked about with the impractical part of getting into the buildings. But then the districts require the candidate to live there so that they do have a attachment to that particular district. Because otherwise, you know, and I use the example, I mean, if you look up in the Villages, for example, their county commission is made up in that, what is it? I can't remember the name of that. Sumter, thank you. Sumter County, they have, you know, the whole development of the Villages is taken over the whole county. Well, their commission is weighted by all the people from the Villages on the commission. So, you know, they don't have a district, is what I'm trying to say. They don't elect them from the district. And it would be just like us not having districts, and, you know, Madeira Towers has 4 people living in it, and they're all in District 4. So you're keeping the district requirement for residency and representation, but just like you've always been able to vote citywide for all the candidates, You're simply allowing them to get the signature card citywide.
I can't tell you
See, I
that
didn't
with my
realize.
experience in smaller cities, even smaller than this city, sometimes it's difficult to get people to run. And the more hurdles and barriers you put in their way, the less likely you're going to have a good pool of candidates. So if you want to encourage people to run and participate in city government and an elected office, this would make it easier to collect the signatures. You can also collect signatures from 50 and then do a payment instead of collecting 100 signatures.
Yeah, but I was talking about
So-
that ballot question 11, how that actually related to 12, I think, because I couldn't understand why we even needed, I couldn't understand why we needed 11 if 12 you were going to be able to.
They're two separate things. 11 is just to check every 5 years that the numbers in the districts are about equal. Because you're trying to set up district commissioners, so you want one from equal parts of the city, population
Oh,
based.
that's where your comments came in.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess
The
I
other one
understand.
is allowing you to collect your signatures, but you still have to live in that district. And knowing that you're going to get elected anyway by everyone in the whole city.
Okay,
12 is a
it'll
yes
sink
for-
in.
12 is a yes
It'll
for
sink
March.
in.
Okay, 12 is a yes for March.
Okay?
13.
13 is to just recognize that we use the Pinellas County Canvassing Board, which is how we normally do it, Clara, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
But
just
the wording-
recognizing.
Most of
wording
the
is
cities
bad.
in the county does now. They use Pinellas County.
The wording in it's bad, because if you go, the charter amendment would amend the charter to appoint the Pinellas County Canvassing Board shall be designated as the canvassing board. So that needs to be kind of rewritten there. I'm terrible at grammar, but I even picked that one up.
Yeah, we say,
Okay, so
amend the
that's a
charter
reword.
twice, we don't have to say that.
In March.
Why did we take out general? The Board of Commissioners shall by ordinance. By ordinance prescribe the manner of holding special elections not inconsistent with the provisions hereof. Why did we take out both general?
We can leave general
We're gonna
in,
have
I
to
don't
tell
know
her.
that there was a reason to take it out.
I mean-
Unless we were thinking that state statutes controls general elections, but they do control aspects of special.
Reckon that was just ancient
Well, and then it
language.
goes on to say for all elections under this charter, so I
Maybe we
don't-
should just say holding elections, take
Yeah,
out general
take out
and special.
special.
Yeah, take out special too. Okay,
Okay, number 13, I would say yes on number 13 and do it in
March.
November.
If they get it rewritten.
okay, number 14,
I mean 14,
is it okay to go November on 13?
yes.
And number 14 is to adopt a definition of relative for this anti-nepotism provision. We've gone to the state statute and picked up the broadest definition of relative that's there.
we need to take city treasurer out. It's in there in 3 locations.
Well, I guess it's, if it passes, that the city treasurer comes out.
Oh, so we have to leave it in. Okay.
Yeah, the city treasurer would come out with that other question. If they decide to remove city treasurer from throughout,
I see.
that'll come out there then also. This is just a nepotism question. Any discussion on number 14 or a date?
So you're just saying the recall is set by what the Florida statute is, right?
Yeah, and it's a pretty long definition. It's more than 75 words of relatives.
I think
So,
that's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Pretty easy.
It picks
Put
up
it in November.
a very broad relative definition.
So it was updating what we had.
And what it does, the anti-nepotism, is it prohibits relatives of the Board of Commissioners, the city manager, the city clerk, or the city treasurer from doing business with the city in connection with their office.
So
Or the
15 is
city.
yes for November, correct?
Okay,
16,
or 15.
15.
15 is simply to adopt the recall provisions that are in Florida statutes.
correct.
As confusing as they are, we're bound by the Florida statutes, recall provisions.
So 15 is a yes for March?
March? Okay.
16, salary, I just.
16 is to delete all reference to the salaries of the mayor and the commissioners out of the charter. It would be set by statute or ordinance.
I just say yes.
Got in there.
Say yes, but put it in
Yeah.
March.
That's fine.
Number 17, this is about when a newly elected commissioner would take office. It would be at the first meeting to be held on or before the last day of the month in which the election was held.
I would like to see this one changed. It needs to be done, but I think it needs to be changed from 60 days to 90 days. They hand you the handbook and say, okay, at the first meeting, the second meeting, you've got to have the changes, so it goes into effect.
Oh, that's the rules of procedure in the second part there.
Yeah.
And you know what, that needs to be, require rules be adopted within 60 days. So you wanted that to be 90 days?
I think at least
Right,
90.
I agree with the 90 days as well.
I think 60, I mean, we were pushing, it took us a lot longer than that even, but,
Right.
you know, especially if you're brand new to, and you've never done this before, and you're sitting there trying to read, what your left and right limits are, and try to change it. So you come to the first meeting, they say, here's a book. Next meeting, you got to tell us what changes you want to make.
Yeah.
I think that's just a little too quick.
Okay.
So do 17 change and put it in March?
Right.
Number 18, this is the question about deleting the city treasurer from the list of charter officers. And again, that would make the department an equal department with all other departments in the city under the city manager.
I'd say yes, and let's put it
I'd say yes, but I'm so gun shy on it. And it's just where we came from.
What we can do is, if the
I'm
board's
leaning
pleasure,
towards no.
if it is the board's pleasure, prior to obviously this coming before March, we can provide you a comprehensive, presentation concerning this type of situation and how it works out in other cities, et cetera. So you can have a little bit more information on the topic and not have to make an effective decision today, because we have adequate time to be able to do some research
Can we
on
kind of
it.
set this one for March and then do a really
Workshop.
in-depth workshop
Yeah.
thing on it? Because this is very close to all of us here.
Yeah.
And I think it deserves more time than
I agree.
the 2 minutes we're giving it right at the moment.
Not a problem.
Nancy, can I comment on
Yes.
that too? Because it was hashed and rehashed and obviously very mindful of how and why it was of
Right.
concern to many of us. But I think that the clarifications that are coming about in the definition of the city manager's responsibilities and duties, and how, and go beyond responsibilities and duties, but interim city manager, that we cleared up some inconsistencies the way it read before, and how they could be appointed and when they could be appointed, because we were in limbo before because of the way the charter was worded.
Right. No, I
And so we think we've managed to, stepping back from the actual position of the city treasurer, but anyway, I think that there is some cleanup on that interim, should the city manager not be available for whatever those reasons are, that there's a mechanism in place that
Right.
would kind of help with that.
I agree.
So you're going to get back with us and
So tentatively for March, but a
Yeah.
workshop preceding that
Okay.
discussion. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Number 19.
19 is clarifying that it's preferable that the city manager live within the city of Madeira Beach, but that it's not mandatory.
I don't see any reason to put that in there because we can always put it in a future contract, if that's our desire.
I think there was something in the existing charter.
It
Unfortunately, I
says
don't
it
have the
would
charter
require-
amendment.
I do,
That's fine with me.
I brought it with me.
It's in their packets behind the ballot ordinance. If we go to page, let's see. Page 20.
It actually says, but
Oh, I know why I didn't put it in, because this was just so long. It was going to screw up the page numbering. But it'll be in there in the final ordinance. Do you see where it is located, the
it
residency?
is, it says, right now it reads, we cleaned up the language because it was really awful about indefinite term and fixes compensation, but it says the manager shall be appointed solely on the basis of his executive and administrative qualifications, comma, but may reside outside the city while in office only with the approval of the Board of Commissioners. So we reworded that.
I'd say for 19, yes, and let's put it on November.
I may have some additional language. I'll check in the morning to see if there's something else we need to add to the question. There was a lot of language that was added on city manager. I want to make sure we have it all in there. The next
And
one is
remember when all
20.
that terminology was done with regards to city manager and all those, and all the titles and stuff, there was,
It's a lot of
there were no
reorganizing.
contracts, you know, the city manager never had contracts with the city. I mean, they served at the city years and years ago, so a lot of that is,
And a lot of these provisions in charters, when you find them, it's, you know, not assuming that the advent of the cell phone, they wanted the city manager where the police chief can go and knock on the door and say, hey, we've got a problem. So there's some things that certainly have changed.
So have you witnessed that yet?
The police chief knocking on my door, if that happens, I'm in the wrong city.
So from going from strengthening the requirements and qualifications of the city manager in the charter, we also then segued into the next one for the city clerk, because we felt that in today's world and going forward, that, you know, it should be in the charter that you want a clerk that has these professional requirements, and
Yeah, I agree, but my only question was, on the one for 19, it says, must be a member and maintain membership, and why aren't we putting that same wording in 20? So,
We have it, it's just not in the ballot question. We could put it in there.
yeah,
And
because,
Must
we've
be a
got it.
member and maintain membership
yes.
in
and we've
good
got a
standing.
his, her in there too, which you'll catch, but.
The other thing about 19 is, wouldn't we have the same requirement for the city managers? We do the clerk with regards to the Florida, Jonathan, what is it called?
Florida
The
City County Management Association, and then you have
Yes.
the ICMA, International City County Management Association.
Right, so wouldn't, we have both in for the clerk, so why wouldn't we have
I
both in
think
for the city
I
manager?
think they did put some language with respect to the manager as far as in good standing. I think it's one of the,
Not with the, we
It's right
didn't
here.
add
Did
the
you-
second state organization. We put in ICMA, but then for the clerk, we put in the IIMC and the FACC. So you're saying do the same thing.
The
for
Florida Associate, whatever, what's it called?
FCCMA, Florida City
Yeah,
County Management
FCCMA.
Association.
Yeah.
So that takes
would
care
make
of
sense.
both of them, for both in the state and
Yeah.
in national.
On
Is
this
that
one,
something you'd be certified by, Jonathan, or is that just a membership?
That's
type
a
of-
membership, but you
Member.
can, yeah,
Member
you have
of
to
good
be,
standing.
you have to be in good standing with both those associations, for me, to keep my credentialing.
Okay, I'll put member in good standing in the
Yeah, so-
FCCMA and spell it out.
November for both of those.
Both in March, I mean, in November.
1, 2,
I'm gonna have a question on this one. I don't know why it has on there the qualifications of the clerk. It has to, based on his or her experience, professional administrative qualifications, et cetera. Because none of the other positions, I mean, that should be true, but none of the other positions state those qualifications.
None of what other position?
I think
Well, we had a
I think the committee was particularly concerned that the clerk be a qualified clerk. I have seen some cities hire clerks that don't have qualifications really, and they expect them to get them on the job.
No, I understand the qualifications part, but I mean, we're not gonna hire someone who doesn't have experience, and we're not gonna hire some, you know,
I think they're looking to the future. I know you wouldn't, but some future commission might hire someone that doesn't have any qualifications.
really.
You know, and I think also when we were advertising for the city clerk and the city manager, and I had talked to Karen, I said, why was this and this and this? She goes, well, it's not written down anywhere that, you know, they have to have this or that. You know, so by putting in the charter, when down the road, if we ever have to announce again for a city clerk or a city manager, it would state you have to be.
It doesn't hurt to have it in there, so.
Huh?
It doesn't hurt to have it in there.
Well,
You may want to say duties of the city clerk's office too, maybe.
And I think, Madam Mayor, if I may, I think one of the things that it shows to me, if I was looking at it, and the clerk can certainly opine, it shows me if I'm looking to apply for the job that this community values somebody with that professional expertise and that experience. So it shows to me that you're going to commit to ensuring that I maintain my certification, that I stay in good standing, and that you're committed to professional development because you value that expertise that those individuals with those certifications bring to the
I
organization.
understand the part about the certifications.
So-
Absolutely. Okay, so March and yes, right?
Yes.
No, November. I would say,
November.
Oh, November.
rather than have confusion, I think both should be November
Yeah.
together.
Number 21 deals with the city attorney's office and would prohibit the city attorney from representing an elected official in a recall case or in a commission on ethics case.
I think it should be left up to the attorney.
I think I agree with this. I'd say yes on this. And after a lot of consideration and thinking about it, it's like, are we putting the city attorney in the middle, you know, and
Yeah, I don't have a problem with taking myself out of this one, but this is up to you, up to you guys.
but, you know, because we're still represented by the insurance company.
In some cases, up to a certain policy limits, if you go through the notification process and if you meet the requirements of the insurance and aren't under any exclusions. So not always, but most of the time.
Well, this reads, you know, then it's at the expense of the city, period.
It does say, however, the elected official is entitled to legal representation in any recall, litigation, or commission on ethics proceeding at the expense of the city.
You know, so thinking about this and talking to some people, you know, I kind of looked at it like,
I think it's to stop the chilling effect. If you're going to run for office, but you know
Yeah.
you're going to immediately get commission on ethics complaints and you're going to get recalls,
Right.
it discourages people from running if they have to go spend their own personal money on lawyers to be able to keep their seat.
and if you can go to an attorney and say, hey, listen, it says right here in the charter, if you defend me, win, lose, or draw, you will be paid by the city.
Yeah.
So I think this is a very good amendment.
Yeah, I think the attorney should be taken out of the equation just because any kind of perception,
Yep.
any time of misperception.
What, March or November?
November.
And just to point out that, you know, it was
I can't
very
hear you, Dawn.
important to make. It was very important to make sure that it, as Ralph said, that, you know, people know that they are going to be represented in this kind of a legal action, because in past history, the city has had elected officials who were sued, the city refused to represent them. This was in many years past, and the person had to mortgage their condo to defend themselves. And then when they won, they were reimbursed and got the heck out of Dodge because they didn't want to be here anymore. So, you know, let's make sure that we have legal representation and that the city is stepping forward.
You know,
When
there's,
my husband was mayor, he paid his own legal fees, and the judge kicked it out of court. Said, "You don't have anything better to bring me, don't bring me anything," and he paid his own legal fees. That was a long time ago, but.
I think the thing is that you
But he
want to
should have
encourage
been.
people from all income brackets to run for office. If only people who can afford lawyers, can run, then it really limits, almost establishes a de facto income limit to be able to run and maintain your office.
you know, I don't know if we need to go back and look at the charter, or if we need to do an ordinance or whatever, but I know the previous commission put in there, they voted to allow the city to pay the legal bills no matter how high they went. No dollar limit on them.
Whether they were found
Guilty or not,
guilty or
yep.
not. That was 2016, Jerry? Is that-
You know, and I think there should be a dollar limit on something like that. I don't think we should put the city,
Well, you've
I
got
think that's
insurance
a question
limits,
for another
right?
time.
well, I don't know if we need to add that.
The insurance has certain limits, and after
No,
that, it
you
runs
wouldn't
out,
wanna
and then
have
the
them.
city winds up
Do an
looking at
ordinance then?
Right,
Okay, that's what I'm
overages.
asking.
right.
There have been occasions, there was a city commissioner from Sarasota, and she was charged with a sunshine violation because she went to a business group luncheon and they discussed the homeless problem. And there was another sitting City of Sarasota commissioner at the meeting. And they had to fight that case from the Citizens for Sunshine. Andrea Morganson and Mike Barfield brought the case, and the city ran up, I think, over $200,000 defending her in that Sunshine case, which she ultimately won. But the city had to spend $200,000 on that case.
So using that as the example, if you had a spending limit on it, she was found not guilty, she was, not in violation, so,
If there was a $100,000 cap, then she'd have to pay $100,000 of her
And you
own
wouldn't
money, which
want
she
that.
might not even have.
right, that's
She
what I'm
might
saying.
lose her house or something.
I'm not arguing the dollar amount right now. I'm arguing, or I'm asking, does this go in the charter, or do we do this through an ordinance and set up a dollar limit?
But
How
I'm
does-
You don't wanna set
saying
up
the
a dollar
dollar, you
limit.
wouldn't want to set
Just
a
like you
dollar
said, the
limit.
lady won,
But how about if she would have lost, and it was $200,000?
then she would end up paying it.
That's
Well,
what I'm
it's
saying.
not in anywhere. I don't think you can go back to an I mean,
I think if you're
that
gonna
goes
do.
back to the
if you're gonna-
knowingly.
yeah, If you're gonna do it, it's probably fair to give this to the voters, so the voters can decide. The voters would be the ones who would be deciding whether you would be entitled to legal representation in recalls or ethics proceedings. If they vote yes for this, then they're the ones deciding. Otherwise, it keeps coming back here every year for you guys to decide by a matter of policy. I think in 2016, it was just a motion and it wasn't a resolution or an ordinance, it was just a policy, a board policy. So
But
you
I-
could do it by ordinance, but then you wouldn't go to the voters wouldn't get a say in it. You could-
I just feel
That's what I'm kind of
strongly,
asking.
yeah, but I just feel strongly about the dollar limit situation, because quite frankly, and Nancy, I hear what you're saying, but we've all been exposed to courts of law, and there's no such thing anymore as reasonable attorney fees. That's not a thing. But there's also not reasonable medical bills. So what I'm saying is that how could you look at that and say, here's this woman that had this situation, ran up $200,000 worth of bills, you don't have a guarantee that you're going to win. Right doesn't mean you win in a court of law. So, okay, so she lost, and you'd go back to her and say you have to pay what was over the amount that nobody'd run for office.
Sure.
I certainly wouldn't want to expose
Okay.
myself to that, because you're at the whim of the law, and you're at the whim of the attorney that's representing you, that the insurance company's given you, and hope that that attorney's going to have a good case. And maybe they have a bad day and you lose, so.
Well, if we don't have a specific dollar amount to put in, remember the charter also is supposed to live over time, like a constitution. So dollar amounts might seem good now, but they might not be good in 10 years or 20 years. You could probably do that by
5 years.
ordinance if you wanted to do something, you could do it later by ordinance procedures.
Okay. That was just kind of a question.
you wanna go November?
That wasn't in there.
November on 21.
November for 21.
22 is just defining what an emergency ordinance would be. It would be a situation that poses an immediate risk to health, life, property, or environment, or to an essential interest of the city that is time-sensitive in nature. We don't really have to have this in there. The state statutes allow you to have emergency ordinance adoption procedures. What happens is you adopt an emergency ordinance, and then at the very next regular meeting, you go through the normal adoption process for the first and second reading. This would just, is an idea to clarify for future commissions and yourselves what an emergency is. You don't have to have this in there. If there's so many that are there already, we could take this out. This came from my office, from me, but I don't think we need it.
Should take it out.
Yeah, because the statute prescribes a process already, so.
Yeah. And then 23 is the same. Again, the statute describes the public service taxes, so we don't need to describe it here.
We just were using that to clean up because this was such an outdated paragraph. And we thought
Yeah.
that by removing all that superfluous language, I mean, we don't have telegraph anymore.
It definitely hadn't been changed since 1949.
Right, so we were, taking all that out and just
Right.
referencing the statute.
Okay, so we're not going to
Well,
You might, yeah. You might even take out the word public service and just say taxes. The Board of Commissioners shall have the right to levy taxes by ordinance in a manner not inconsistent with the general law of the state of Florida.
Yeah.
There's no reason to limit it to the public service tax, just all taxes.
That's a pretty easy one, I think. Say yes,
Okay.
and put it on November.
Do November?
Yeah.
23, November.
You got 8?
24,
That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that's not.
I got 8. 1, 2,
I've got 8 for November.
6, 7. I got 8.
I got 1, 3, 13, 15, 18, 19, 20, 21,
18.
23.
Okay.
Oh, we took 18 out, didn't we?
18 is March or November?
18 was the one you're gonna get the information back, that was on the,
It's
So it
March,
would be-
18 is
that
March.
was the treasurer.
18 would be
right?
March.
Yeah, that's March. Yeah.
We can
So
go back
there's
through at
none.
the end, but
8.
I think we got 8.
My mistake.
8 on November and like 13 on March so far. Number 24 is a limitation that's in the existing charter. It's a cap on millage for the purpose of publicity to the city, which is hard to really tell what's being spent that would be considered publicity to the advantages, facilities, and resources of the city. The finance director thought this was strange and kind of antiquated
too.
language, so we thought we'd take it out.
Yeah, that was.
Well, a
great.
membership in a
Let's
chamber of
take that.
commerce, I guess, or something at John's Pass, sometimes we can do expenditures there to draw people to the city. Or the seafood festivals, the fishing festivals.
Oh, yeah.
When we had one of our seminars, he addressed that issue.
That's great when a city's first starting out, you need to advertise it.
No, this was,
You didn't pull that around.
it did have something to do with membership in,
He wanted
it
it
did
left
say
in.
something like you should not use city funds for the
Okay.
purpose of
Advertising
being
and promotion.
a member, and no, it was a member in an organization, it was something.
Yeah, there's certain, the statute really says that the public has to derive a benefit from that association. So, for instance, if obviously I'm an alumni at the University of Central Florida, so if I wanted to utilize public monies to pay my alumni dues, the city's not deriving a benefit from that. So it has to be something that the city benefits from that membership or that contribution, so. This is an absolute accounting nightmare. I don't even know how you effectively would try to account for that if you were in a situation where somebody would audit that. That would be, because it all depends on how somebody codes something and how finance reconciles it, and it's just, it's
Yeah,
better
just-
to have it out than to have it in.
Yep,
So
take it out.
24 is a yes for November?
Yeah, I think maybe remove references and limitations on, reference to and limitations on. November for 24.
We-
25.
This is ridiculous. This is gonna be major voter fatigue.
Oh, that's
Let's just
10.
get through it, then we'll go back and think if there was too many, we can knock some out or something. 25, there's a section in there about investigations. The Board of Commissioners may make investigations into internal affairs of the city, and the committee recommended deleting this. The chair could talk about it if you'd like. I don't have much to say about it. Yeah, it's
Again, it was just
infrequently
something
used.
so totally outdated in today's world with an HR department and department heads and city manager and authority and finance and, I mean, it's not something, it could become, again, a political witch hunt. That,
Yeah, I think it should be go
Out.
out.
Yeah.
out.
November,
March.
March. 26, this would allow the city manager to call special meetings. Right now, it's the mayor or a majority of the commissioners. This would add the city manager to that list of people that can call a 24-hour notice meeting.
I think that's appropriate.
Yes, never.
November?
Did he say November or
It
never?
was never.
Isn't that already in the BOC handbook?
Let's go with,
In
Go with
the
March.
handbook, I have the authority to call a meeting, but this is a special meeting to effectively, within the 24-hour time frame.
The same way you can.
Same way effectively.
No less than 24 hours.
No less than 24
I
hours.
don't know why we need to change that. You just have to ask me and I'll call the special meeting.
It might not always be like that.
Yeah.
If you disagree,
Right.
then he still gets to call the meeting.
Sure.
that's why I said never, Maggie.
Okay, 27, this is to change the 2-year capital improvements program to a 5-year capital improvements program, which is what we do
Right.
anyway now for state statutes.
Yeah, and
Is
this,
26 going in
26,
March?
March or
27.
November.
26 is March.
Oh, March.
Oh, I put November.
No meetings till March, Jonathan.
okay, no problem.
Twenty-seven is a 5-year capital improvements program.
The charter, of course, has a provision in there that requires the city manager to provide you a 2-year capital improvements plan. I certainly believe that a 5-year is more appropriate. In addition to, it's consistent with most other agencies. So if it is the board's pleasure, this would probably be something that I'd like for us to look to put to the voters in November. From the standpoint is, I really would start, I want to plan and I want to ultimately look to fund a 5-year capital improvements plan. So as we get ready to present fiscal year 2019 budget, we're already starting to have conversations about 2020. So this would be something that we incorporate in the new budget rolling out for the 2020 year. So this is something that we would definitely recommend be considered in November.
I'd probably recommend change to, it says the charter amendment would require adoption of a longer-term 5-year
Thank you.
capital
I was going to
improvements
say,
program.
so people could see that,
Yeah,
that by changing it from 2 to 5 doesn't mean that, in other words, 5 gives you a longer picture, a bigger window, and you're planning further out. But if someone were reading that, they may not think of it that way, and they think, oh, you're just skating, you don't want to do it every 2 years.
Right.
Well, that's not the case. You do it every year,
Right.
but it's giving you a broader
5 years.
window.
Right.
okay, November or December, March?
November, I thought was.
November for 27. 28, this would replace the Board of Adjustment with a special magistrate to hear variances and special exception hearings, which is kind of what we do now, is we just get rid of the antiquated reference to the Board of Adjustment.
I'd say yes,
Yes.
for March.
March. Or should that be November too?
This would change the signatures required for a citizens initiative or citizen referendum from the current 25% to only 10%.
I don't think that's working hard enough.
Pardon me?
I guess I just didn't feel like that was working hard enough. I would think that if we,
This was a Sam Baker initiative as well, because we found that when we were doing a ballot initiative and in line with other municipalities and other electoral processes, that 25% was onerous.
I think recall we
it
need.
is
how many do-
hard, but then it shouldn't be an easy process. It
How
should
many,
be.
yeah, how many do we need for,
10%.
for recall, how many was it, Claire?
10%.
First round was
First one.
10% and second round was 15%.
Yeah, so recall's 10, why aren't we doing this for 10?
Right.
This would just be to put it on a ballot, then you would actually have to get a vote.
I say yes in March.
Any other comments on how to set this up?
No,
Good, okay. 29 will go in March. Okay, so with that direction, I'll split this ordinance out. I'll have a November ordinance ready for you for tomorrow. I'll type it up and then in the morning and we'll distribute it for
So
tomorrow's.
right now, we've got 10 that we're looking at for November.
Get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
11.
What am I missing?
10 questions,
Okay.
1, 3,
We got
13,
1, 3,
14.
13, 15, 19, 20, 21,
No, 15 is
23,
March.
24, 27, 28.
28, we didn't say 28.
15 is March.
28 is March.
28 is March.
28 is March.
If, Madam Mayor, if we may, just for purposes of the official record, if we can have the clerk, who is going to be assembling this, just confirm what number she has, what ballot initiative she has, so we can make sure that we incorporate all that in the proposed ordinance.
Claire, I have 1, 3, 13, 14, 19, 20, 21, 23, 24,
You said 14?
27 on
No, I
November.
got 15.
You got 15, not 14.
13, 15, 19.
15 I had written down March. Are you sure?
I have 15
That's the
down.
recall provisions of the Florida statutes?
That's what I had it down.
15 is March.
Okay, then 6, what, wait a minute, go through 13 and then what?
In November, I had 1, 3, 13, 14,
14, wait a minute. Okay, it's 14.
and I had
14, okay.
19, 20, 21, 23, 24, and 27.
Okay.
Okay, any more discussion?
The only thing I would like to say, because I know you said it, and you guys said it, and I came into their charter meeting on Friday. Once again, you guys really did a lot of work, and I really, really appreciate it. I know you probably pulled your hair out a lot of times on this, but I know I do, and I'm assuming the city will also appreciate all the work that you guys did. As a committee, you did one heck of a job, so thank you.
all of the citizens will appreciate it too. Thank you.
And thank you again, and any more discussion at this workshop? It is 8:08, and this meeting is adjourned.